Hi, do you struggle with social anxiety? It's something that has been bothering me since I was a teenager. It runs in my family, it comes out when you hit puberty, and it sucks. At that time, and for most of my life, I didn't know what it was. All I knew was that previously, I didn't have a problem being in a social situation, whether it was a small group or a large one. I felt fine. But at some point during puberty, it became different. Even when I was with people I loved, like we would go and visit my uncle and his family 2 hours away from where we lived, and I loved being there with them. I loved spending time with my cousins, but it changed. Normally, it would be we would all be together, and then us kids would get bored and we wander off and do something together. But as we got older and this social anxiety started hitting, and keep in mind, I'm more extroverted than introverted. I'm somewhere in the middle, but in the direction of extroverted. Instead of going off with my cousins, I would isolate myself in a room, and I didn't understand why. I never talked to anybody about it. I never, I don't know why. It, it was very frustrating for me, but I guess I just never thought that I should talk about it. I certainly didn't understand what was going on. And now I understand exactly what was going on. Social anxiety was taking over my life. So in this video, what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to give you my personal story of how I learned to conquer social anxiety without even knowing what I was doing. And then I'm going to break it down for you so that hopefully you can take that information and use it in your life. Now, I'm not going to guarantee that it's going to happen fast. In fact, I will say that chances are high that it's not going to take days or weeks or even months. It'll probably take years. But if you keep working at it, you can get to the point where, like me, you can do public speaking, teaching, and even going on television, which I've done. And it was not a problem. Whereas previously, when I was still working on social anxiety, I remember I went to a class reunion once, and I just did a little impromptu speech in front of all my former classmates, and I was shaking and nervous and stuff like that. Not a problem. Not anymore. So what happened to me? Well, in my 20s and late teens, I think a little bit, we had, back in those days, we had something called bulletin board services, or BBSs, or not services, systems. And some of them had only one phone line, like mine. And some of them had maybe 3 phone lines, and some of them had dozens or even hundreds of phone lines. And so you could, on these multi-line ones, you could interact with each other, kind of like with the internet, but it was all basically localized unless people could figure out a way to call in from a remote area, which eventually started to happen more and more and more. But at that time, the place that I started to become more and more involved with, it was called Online Data Systems. It was very famous in the Milwaukee area. It had a lot of lines, a lot of people involved in using it. And they started having get-togethers. And initially, I wasn't on ODS, and initially, I didn't have an interest in going to Online Data Systems get-togethers. But eventually, I started going, and I found that I kind of liked it, especially if I was there with people I knew. And I knew people from the whole BBS community already, having my own BBS and helping other people with their BBSs. And so it was, at least I could hang out with my friends in a kind of social setting where I wasn't really socializing with all the other people, but I was with my friends. One day, I went to a Renaissance festival located on the border of Wisconsin and Illinois. I was walking around and I came upon a spandex shop. Now, I had seen David Lee Roth in his music videos for Van Halen, and I was like, I could never wear that kind of stuff. That's crazy. But I thought, well, let me just take a look at it. And I'm in there and I'm looking at it. I pull out this checkered black and white checkered pair of pants. And the sales lady, she's got nobody else in the store, so she comes over to me and she says, why don't you try that on? And she leads me over to the changing room. So I go into the changing room, pop those on, come back out, and she immediately pulls me out to the front, which this is in a forest, so it's just a natural dirt pathway going past all these shops and entertainment areas and stuff like that and food vendors. And she pulls me out there, and everybody that works at these Renaissance festivals basically uses a British accent. So she calls out, man with a nice bum here, man with a nice bum. And she's showing off my flat butt. On one hand, I was kind of embarrassed, but on the other hand, she was a good-looking woman. I was flattered. She got the sale. And that wasn't the only sale. I came back a few other times on other years and bought more from her. And I'm not, the first time I bought, it was primarily because she just did such a great job in selling me on the idea that I look good in it. And that was clever, I have to admit. So one time, having this anxiety with going to these events, I popped on my pair of spandex and I went to one of the major events wearing my spandex. This was their birthday event, birthday bash that they had every year. And I wore my spandex, and man, something felt different. I wasn't anxious. I relaxed. I had a good time, met new people, and that was nice. It really was. And so when I went to these events, oftentimes I would wear spandex. Now, outside of these events, I didn't wear spandex, and I didn't wear spandex to every single event. Like when we would go on our yearly road trip up to Crivitz, Wisconsin to go whitewater rafting and camping, I didn't wear my spandex then. But at the birthday bash and some of the other get-togethers, I would wear my spandex. And I didn't understand, number one, that I had social anxiety. This is something I only learned about maybe 8-10 years ago. And number two, I didn't know what the spandex was doing for me. All I knew was that when I went to the events wearing the spandex, I was relaxed. I could just, do whatever, and it didn't matter. Even one time when this one guy who was supposed to be a friend of mine, he pulls me aside and says, look, I'm sorry, I can't be your friend because you wear that spandex. I was like, okay, bye. Why did I react that way? Because if a guy's going to judge me so superficially on me wearing funny looking spandex, then he doesn't deserve my friendship. So it got easier and easier and easier. And eventually I didn't even need to wear spandex anymore. So that's my personal story. And this is the way it works. Think about when you go online and you're using an alias and nobody knows who you are, and you feel free to do and say things you wouldn't normally do. And some people can be pretty nasty in that situation because they feel confident there are no repercussions for them. Or say you go to a Halloween party and you wear a costume and nobody can recognize you because you've got a mask on and things like that. There's this kind of a feeling of freedom in a way that you might experience. And it allows you to not be concerned about your appearance because you're wearing a costume. And so that people are going to be looking at that costume. And anything judgments they make are based on the costume that is not something you normally wear and is not who you are. And the same thing works whether you put on face paint or you put on a big elaborate hat with a giant feather in it, or you wear an elaborate cloak, or you put on spandex, or whatever it is. You change your appearance, and you know that change is going to be judged by people, and that's not who you are, so it doesn't affect you. so you can just feel free to relax and have a good time. That's how it works. Now, again, this is not something that's going to fix it overnight. It probably will take a long time. But if you don't give up and you keep working on it, eventually you get to the point like I did where I stopped remembering that I was even wearing spandex. I got so comfortable that I wasn't self-conscious about the spandex. I wasn't worried about people saying things about me. Nothing. The anxiety was wiped out. And that can happen to you. And then once you get to that point, you'll automatically just kind of transition to not wearing that stuff again, or you'll be very comfortable with wearing it for these events and you'll just keep on doing it. Whichever way works for you, it doesn't really matter. You can make that your character that you play for when you go out to these events. But I think it's better if you just learn to be happy in your own skin and not worry about what people say, rather than continuing to rely on that to allow you to function in a social situation. So take that step, use something that draws the focus away from whatever it is you think people are talking about you, and onto that thing that you normally would never wear. Even if that means covering up your whole face with some kind of paint so they can't even tell who you really are. It doesn't matter. The point is you're healing your social anxiety, whether this is induced because of socially unpleasant situations you've experienced, or it's because, like me, it's a genetic trait. You can overcome it if you're willing to put in the effort. So if you have any questions about that, please feel free to put that down in the comments. I certainly hope this helps you. I can't guarantee how long it's going to take you. That all depends on you. If you tend to be a more pessimistic person, a negative person, a Murphy's Law person, it's probably going to take longer, because that will hold you back, because you're always thinking negatively instead of thinking about take that possibility and see what happens. But it will help. Just give it the chance, time and time and time again, and eventually it will make a difference in your life. Because, like I said, I've been on television and it didn't bother me. I've been in front of audiences of hundreds of people. It didn't bother me, because I've conquered my social anxiety. And I hope you will too. Thanks for watching and have a great day.